Well, thank you all for joining the African American Genealogy Society of Fort Wayne and our research tools and tips. But again, our topic today is an interesting one. I call it a deep dive into Alabama and Mississippi. I'm a researcher. I've been in many forms, both in the military and outside. And to me, a deep dive is looking at what resources are really available as we look to this. Most of us, again, have used Ancestry and built our family trees and added information or Family Search or MyHeritage. Well, let's take a look at what else might be available. I guess I have a key question: how to tackle a research challenge in both of those states. I guess the key thing for all of us whenever you start it is start with what you know, your family tree or information on a particular individual. But then for me as a researcher, identify the questions you want answered. So this is part of a research plan. What is it you want to learn? And that will determine the record set that may help you find what you're looking for. A key one here for me, and I found it, again, very, very helpful, understand both the area and the time frame you are searching. And the reason is, as you look at it, records move around, boundaries move around, the whole bit. So again, look at the area and the time frame. Understand or create a fan club. In other words, friends, associates, and neighbors. Again, from my personal family, the Brothers family, we had 5 other groups who, again, are aligned with us through marriage, came down from Nova Scotia together within a 10-year period. So again, if I could track any one of them, I could track the rest of my family. But to me, the secret to successful research is, this is I'm stealing this from the realtors: location, location, location. The first one, we're talking about geographic location. Things like the state, the county, city, town, parish. And the big one here is post office, because in many cases, that may be the only thing that exists in that area. I also want to mention that many of these areas are unincorporated. So again, in that situation, again, research may take a different bend. One of the neat tools for us is Google, because you can Google the community to gain insight. And I really call this due diligence research. And Wikipedia is a great source, and you'll see where I got it from, for example. Now, the next one is location and time. Can I place these people in a particular time period? Pre or post-Civil War, 19th, 20th, or 21st century, peacetime, wartime, or something else? Again, there may be other things going on in that time frame that helps to identify the time. The last one is location. Record locations, where they're located. County courthouses, state and county archives, local and state libraries, church cemeteries. Again, the time frame and location will help dictate to you where to find those records. But the key in my search has always been, where is the county seat? Now, here's an example of geographical location changes. On the right-hand side, you'll see the Alabama counties in 1820. Take a look at the current Alabama counties. So again, depending upon the time frame, it'll make a big deal of difference how you search for records. As they merge counties or whatever, or broke counties up, the records may have stayed in one location or another. Now, when I talk about location and time, again, we look at the pre-Civil War. Again, we have two conditions: slave states and non-slave states. And things happen differently in those two states in different time periods. An example is Washington, D.C. And again, many slaves escaped to Washington, D.C. And when they got there, they received their freedom. They were allowed to be free. A different time frame. And again, Maryland, D.C., and those areas, again, they vacillated between slave situations and non-slave. The post-Civil War era was very, very different, again, in the North and in the South. Things happened dramatically differently. And again, the records, again, will depend upon the time frame and location. Again, in many of the southern states, in I won't say all locations, but many locations, some of the records were destroyed. But the key is to find out where copies of them are. In many cases, there are copies. World War I, again, was a great time frame, again, to investigate, again, because you now have the regular census records when you look at it. You've got city directories. You've got town directories, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, I live in a community in New Hampshire, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and every 2 years, it developed its own town directory, really a town census. And so, again, those are the things that are available. The Great Depression was a big time frame and movement of people. We talk about the migration of our people as well, but the Great Depression also offered people a chance to change. World War II. World War II was I'll use the term a turning point in some respects, because again, many of our men and women were involved overseas, not as well as stateside. And post-World War II, the census records, i.e. 1950, are a little different when you take a look at them. And I gave a presentation on the census records. Now we talk about record locations, local records, and it can be in an unincorporated location. Somebody may assume the role as a record keeper. For example, cemetery records are a prime example of that. Town records, small towns, they themselves do have records. And the question is, when were some of those records transferred to the county or to the state? The county records the same way. As you look at them over a time period, eventually those records, in fact, were shipped to the state itself. And then the state records, how were they compiled? Where are they located? Can you get access to them? And these all relate to data sources and information. Now, for me, as an engineer, information sources are a key thing for me as I do research. And you can see the census records, both state and federal. Many folks didn't realize that there were state census records, tax records, land records, probates, wills. There were slave census records and slave sales records, birth, marriage, death, and divorce records. And again, it depended upon the time frame as to whether those records are available now or were ever even recorded. So you have a problem. And again, there were the informal divorce records where they just walked away. And so consequently, and the reason that happened was because the cost of a divorce. A legal divorce costs quite a bit of money. So people opted to just go their separate ways. Directories, I mentioned city, town, and other. One of the biggie for me in New England are the annual reports. The communities or towns in New England provided a report on an annual basis. It lists the birth, deaths, marriages, and other important information in that report. So again, as you look through these towns and communities, see if they have it. Another big one is newspapers. Newspapers are, again, with the Facebook and Twitter and everything else of the day itself. And again, you're looking at local, national, town, or community. We're talking about cultural or ethnic newspapers. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more. And in the newspaper, beyond information relative to the happenings, obituaries, when they came out, are a fantastic tool to identify family members and families in that sense. Church records, school records. And again, here in Allen County, of course, we have a massive library resource of school information itself, the school directories themselves. And so consequently, those may also exist in other places. Social Security, military, pension. The Freeman Bureau, and when I use the term institutional, I'm talking about things like asylums, poorhouses and things like that. And again, over time, those things did exist. We used to have an institution here in Fort Wayne. It no longer exists. So again, but the records do. In the situations, how do I find them? When I talk about how to search, I'm looking at searching as both a history and a genealogy detective. We talked about a research plan. What are you researching? Vital information, relationships, movement patterns, occupations. What is it you're looking for? Because those help determine your search path. But the key for us is, as an engineer, define what you already know or suspect. Again, we talked about name, birth, death dates, family members, but a biggie here is family names. If you notice when you do the DNA and Ancestry and the others, they'll come out with a listing of names relative to families. And again, because remember, when people get married, the names change, particularly on the female side. Not necessarily on the male side, but the female side. The time period and location. Do I know where my relatives lived and what time frame they did? Did any serve in the military? So really the bottom line in this is establish the who, what, where, when, and how. How did it happen? Now, there are resources to support your research, both online and in person. Again, we talk about Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage, all three fantastic resources. We talk about newspapers. And again, you talk about newspapers.com. We can also talk about the African American newspapers because, again, in a particular time period, no matter where the information originated, it could be recorded in a particular newspaper, i.e. the Baltimore Herald, Chicago, LA, the whole gamut. So again, across the spectrum, people across the country understood what was happening in their communities. The federal census. Again, in some cases, territorial census preceded the federal census. So again, those are the things to look at. If you're interested in looking at a particular time period, slave schedules, mortality schedules are interesting because, again, they talked about the persons who passed away the preceding year. So it gave you some insights in terms of where your relative may have gone and they passed away, but you didn't know that in that time frame. Institutional records, you see them all. One of the interesting ones that I found was in a census. It would have been 1860. My second grand uncle, his parents put him in reform school. And the reason I know that is because the census data, again, they in fact go to all the schools and hospitals. And that's where I found out where it was. And the dude never went home, I might add. He went in the military at that point, but ended up being a great guy afterwards. Again, I have a whole program on that one. But you take a look at deaf, blind, and dumb records, the poorhouse, sanitariums, state census records, if available, are key because the state census was typically 5 years off from the regular census. Tax and land records are again, many of our ancestors, no matter where they lived, own land. And if they own land, they pay taxes by definition. And in many cases, they grew crops and raised animals and paid taxes on them. So again, that information also helps you in that particular time frame. By the way, and also today, I have to, by I think it's the 16th of February, turn in my record to the agriculture department about my small little farm, what we produce, and everything else. So those records still exist and still go on. Court records, again, probate. Don't forget the prison records. Again, those are custody records. We talk about suits, wills, and property disbursement in court records. Again, how was property broken up in some cases from a sale? As we research the location and the time frame, you look at again, the first line talks about our country, county, parish, city, town, community. Again, where did our people come from? Well, country, for me, because some of my ancestors came from Canada. Again, that migration from Canada to the United States, and it was both black and white folks, both moved. Again, because jobs and the like were not available in Nova Scotia in that time frame. Check the communities around your target community for potential records because you don't know exactly where those records resided because of changing boundaries and the like. Check the communities in nearby states, particularly if a county borders another state. And again, records and your family records may reside in either one or both states. And for me, one of the key is find the county seat because again, it gives you some insights in terms of what records are available and what contacts you can make. Pre or post Civil War, were the record repositories destroyed? What are the alternatives? Which century may dictate what records are available? Now, pre-Civil War data, again, it was limited data about slaves unless they were free, and then they were in fact recorded by name. But note the boundary changes, name change, or merging of communities or counties. Now, here we'll talk a little bit about between these, again, in this presentation, large community research. Montgomery, Alabama, for example, and Jackson, Mississippi, both state capitals, both large communities. We can also talk about statewide research because, again, records can be located in many different repositories within a state itself. Countywide research is the same thing. Again, there may be more than one court in a county. If you try to track court records. One of the key things I recommend, and again, many of us have done it, is build a family tree. And again, the online resources are fantastic. Plus, also others. Family tree, for example, is another one that works well. And as you do that, see if the name or names appear that you're looking for on other family trees, but with caution. I add I've got a family named Johnson. I'm afraid there are many Johnsons all over the place. So again, you have to be careful on that. The question I always ask, did any family members remain in a specific location? Mine did in Canada, for example. They did, and they still do. So again, as you research these areas, did any people stay back? Some migrated for a particular reason, but did others not migrate? But a key thing here is document your data. We talk about source citations and the like, because it allows you to go back and find it again if you need to for that resource. One of the things I found interesting, and I do, build a tree for someone you don't know to see how they might fit in your search. In some cases, you'll be surprised, particularly if they lived in the same community. Again, communities aren't that large. People didn't move very far in a time, because remember, in the 1800s, it's horse and buggy, perhaps railroad, perhaps boat. But again, most people, even today, don't go more than 50 miles from where they live, even today. So it may give you some insight. Now, here's a fantastic resource, and we're sitting in it right now. We're talking about the Allen County Public Library and its genealogy resource center. Can you hear me? Okay. And again, I gave you the website. You have both free and free databases, and only those available on site. The African American Gateway is available both on and off site, and the Pathfinders state snapshots are guides. The Alabama, and I'll talk and show you a little later on, PDF and Mississippi PDF are great resources within the library itself. Let's talk about specific research. Now, the federal census records, again, starting in 1820 and then in the 1890 census, again, provide interesting information, but the 1890 census is a problem because a good portion of it burned. But the veteran census is still available. So again, were able to find military people that way. It's fragmented and spotty, for example, for only Perry County and Perryville Township, for example, in Alabama. The slave schedules are available. I mentioned another one, agriculture and manufacturing schedules are key. Again, up through 1880. I might even point out, even now, they're still being done. The defective, dependent, and delinquent census in 1880. Again, if you happen to have a physically or a mentally challenged person in your family, again, that was recorded. What was recorded was not only the individual, but the parents were both recorded and described in those census. Again, for example, a deaf child, was his parents deaf? For example, a blind child, was his or her parents blind? They talked about the family in that context. And again, as you take a look for Alabama, those are the state census records available. And notice there's one for 1907. Interesting off year. And I always pick Montgomery County because I've been to Montgomery quite a bit in the military. So consequently, again, when you take a look at the population, just under 30,000 in 1850, almost 37,000 in 1860. By 1870, almost 44,000. So again, things were very, very different. And it's the fifth largest county by population. And when you take a look at the population composition, it gives you some indications of present time Montgomery County, who is living there. The county seat is Montgomery, the state capital. Montgomery County itself includes Montgomery, Alabama, and the metropolitan statistical area. Again, you'll be able to get this from Wikipedia. The reason I put the diagram up there about the state of Alabama is because it gives you a context. Where is Montgomery County? Located within the state itself. Now, this is Montgomery County. Again, And you notice that Prattville, Wetumpka, Tuskegee are outside Montgomery County. Wetumpka was my classmate from Germany. He was in the Luftwaffe when I went to pilot training. That's post-World War II, folks. Lived in Wetumpka, Tuskegee. I've been to Tuskegee, a fantastic location to go. But again, it gives you some indications of what's available. I also list the adjacent counties. So again, as you look for records and your relatives or potential relatives live in particular areas, look at the adjacent counties as well. On the right-hand side, you get a little bit of information about Montgomery County and about, from the census, what is the population and percentage. So it gives you some indications of how the county itself grew. But notice on the bottom, 2020 and 2021, it's decreasing. So it gives you some insights. Now, what are the cities, towns, and unincorporated communities? Montgomery, obviously, is the big city. The town is Pike Road. But look at all the unincorporated communities that reside within that county. So the key is understand that. So where might the records reside? Well, I would guess the records would reside primarily in Montgomery, if you think about it, because it's the largest area. And again, it's also the county seat. Now let's take a look at a deep dive into Montgomery. It talks about where who it's named for, where it resides, the 2020 census, the population a little over 200,000. And again, it's the 119th most populous city in the United States after Huntsville. I didn't realize that Huntsville was larger than Montgomery. Again, I've been to both, but again, I found that out. So it's interesting. It's the fourth largest in the state. The next one is the town, Pike Road. Its population was just over 9,000, up from 5,000 in the 2010 census. If I were looking at this, I'd try to figure out why did it grow so much? And again, it could be industry in the area. And it's part of the MSA. It was founded in 1815 and was incorporated in 1997. So it gives you some insights in terms of the kinds of records you might be looking for in a particular time frame. Pine Valley is an unincorporated community. It's also known as Pine-tucky, again, where it's located. And the last paragraph talks about, it potentially got its name because of its location on poor sandy soil covered with pine trees. It also was called at one, finally became called Pine Level, and the first post office operated under the name of Pine Level in 1839. So again, you begin to recognize, again, the post office post the Revolutionary War was active, mail was going, and there had to be a post office and a postmaster. Now, I always look for, as I mentioned, city directories. Now, I'm going to just go through a couple of slides here to show you these communities have city directories. Now, if any of your relatives lived in any of these communities, there's a city directory. The question is, what time frame? Decatur, for example, Dothan. When you take a look at the others, Greene County, Jackson, Mobile, obviously Montgomery, North Mobile. You're looking at Scottsboro, Selma, Taylor, Talladega. Many of the names we've seen or heard again through history. So again, on the bottom, you got West Point, Wetumpka, which I talked about, interesting place, and Whistler. So again, this is a case in which there were city directories developed for these communities. And it's a fantastic resource for you to do a deep dive and find out, again, a little more about your family. The city directories for Portsmouth, New Hampshire listed not only the homeowner, but the rest of the family, where the homeowner, again, worked, which was a biggie because my house was built in New Hampshire when I bought it. And let's see, that would have been 1972. It was built in 1866. And the fellow who built it worked for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. So it gives you some insights in terms of, for him, if I were going to search him, records and where am I look for it. So again, you may have the same situation here. This is just an example of a 1920 mobile city directory. And again, it's just a quick snapshot. You can go on Ancestry or Family Search and find them. Now, I've given a list here, and I'm not going to read them off, but I'll show you a couple of examples. But that's part of your handout in terms of resources and guides. What I did do was Google genealogy research in Alabama and pull these up. Oh, again, so each one of these may lead to something else. Okay. An example here, Alabama genealogy. Again, you can search by name, date, and more. So again, you can do that on this particular website. Again, they talk about things that they feature. The salt list, 1862 Alabama salt list. Never heard of it. But again, it's interesting to find out, what impact it had. The history of Butler County here is a recent post. Now, here's the Alabama genealogy pages on this website. So again, at the very top, you see the African American genealogy research. You got databases, maps. So again, if you click on any one of these, you'll be surprised in terms of what comes up. Now, the Alabama African American genealogy research provides, again, information. Again, it talks about Henry Flipper, the first color cadet at West Point, and what he went through, his autobiography. Again, black soldiers in the Spanish-American War. Talk about the riots in New York in 1712. A century of black migration. If your folks migrated, this particular site and that particular point may give you information. There are also slave narratives there. So again, these are the things that are available on this website. A little more, African American research. There's an Alabama Slave Project. And interesting, in Macon County, there's an appraisement and inventory of slaves in wills in that particular county. So again, if you have relatives in that county, again, it may be something to look at. And it does list out another resource, the Afro-American Historical and Genealogy Society in DC. So again, this is an example of a deep dive. Now again, for Alabama, it's Department of Archives and History, okay? It has digital collections, and it talks about the collection itself. The bicentennial was 2017 and 2019 and helped generate information to support this particular website. As also who the contributors are. You can see those. And some of the historical publications available in digital form at the Alabama Archives. So again, when you do a deep dive, I'm able to find more resources. What else is available? How do I get to it? And again, I'm looking, yes, I could drive down there. That's about a 12-hour drive. But I'd like to be able to look online first before I do that. So again, it gives you some insights. Now, another one here, another utterly fantastic resource is a library, Montgomery City County Public Library. Look down the bottom here. It talks about America's obituaries and death notices. It does have the institutional form of Ancestry. It has it when you take a look at what's available. It has Ask a Librarian. If you have any questions about that location and potentially your families, use that link, contact them, and they may be able to give you some insights in terms of how to do research or where to go find it. Now we talk about references. Again, you have the general reference, dictionaries, and then genealogy down below. It has a genealogy homepage. Again, our favorite, Cindy's list, the Encyclopedia of Alabama, information on DNA tests and the like. And again, library links. And a biggie here, which again, we no longer have in our hand, in paper form, white pages and telephone directories. And again, those are also important to us. That right now you got to pay for it now. Go online. But again, those are interesting over particular time frames. I was able to go online, and I couldn't remember my home phone number when I was growing up. So I went online and found it, type thing. I found my grandparents who lived downstairs, their phone number ours. Mine was Harrison, theirs was Garrison. So again, it gives you some insights, in terms of what happened in that time frame. Well, let's take a look at Mississippi. When you take a look at it, one of the first things I wanted to point out was they started compounding births and deaths in 1912, and that's across all of Mississippi. Now, the individual counties or towns or communities may have their own information prior to that, but we're talking about statewide. Certificates for birth more than 100 years ago are available. Certificates for death more than 50 years ago are available. That particular website you'll see a little bit. We talk about census and mortality schedules, but these are the state records for Mississippi, the state census records from 1801 to 1866. It's very comprehensive. So again, it's a way to find people or the fan club, I might add, in these areas, because when people move, as I mentioned, quite often they move together. I like Hinds County, Mississippi. It's the largest county in the state. Its county seats are Raymond and Jackson is the state capital. In 1850, its population was around 25,000. In the 2010 census, 245,000. But notice its composition. So it gives you some insights when you look at it. There were large African-American families in this area. Let's take a look at Raymond. Again, the other large city. Again, it talks about its population in 2010, which is under 2,000. In 2020, they gained a few folks, 27 people, as far as that goes. And it's one of the two county seats, because remember I said, look for the county seats. There were two county seats here. And it's the home of the main campus. I'm not familiar with this community college, Hinds Community College, but there may be information available to it, and it's part of it. And on the right-hand side, I just have a historical population perspective to give you some insights in terms of how it grew. So I suspect it was a farming community. And when you take a look at the composition of 2020, again, it shows that there is still an awful large African-American population. So now, where is the county located? It does not include Vicksburg. It does not include Port Gibson. But there's Jackson, the county of Jackson. Look at the adjacent counties. Again, as you do your research, if any of your family members lived in areas close to other counties, there may have been movement back and forth across those counties. And what about the communities themselves? Now, we do have, in this case, a couple of cities themselves, a couple of towns, and a couple of unincorporated areas. But again, each one, if you click on them, you'll see what happens. So what I did was I selected one from each category. Byram, its population was a little over 11,000 in 2010, up from a little over 7,000 in a 10-year period. And in the 2000 census, it was an unincorporated census designated place, CDP, which meant it was in the federal census. It was listed in the federal census. And the population in 2020, a little over almost 13,000. It was incorporated for the second time in 2009. So it gives you some insights about the history of that particular city. Edwards is a town. The population was a little over 1,000 in the 2010, and again about 200 people in the. It lost a few folks because of the 2000 census was 1,300. But again, I suspect a farming community. Brownsville, unincorporated. It's 12 miles north of, 12 miles southwest of Flora and 8 miles north of Bolton. It is part of the MSA. It was originally known, and again, the key here was known as Spring Hill. So as you do your research, recognize, the name change. His name was changed in 1838. The local Masonic Lodge funded the construction of a male and female school for Brownsville. So it gives you some insights in terms of how that organization supported the community itself. The community was once home to 2 churches, 2 general stores, a drugstore, 2 carrot shops, and a blacksmith shop. So it gives you some insights as you look at it, how that community was composed. Now, I do want to point out again with our African American heritage, that the Masonic organization, both male and female, again, were very, very big in many of these areas. So consequently, as you look through and go back toward the 1800s, see if you can find out information from the Grand Lodge, for example, for the state of Mississippi or the state of Alabama, and see what information they have, what lodges were in the area at that time. So it may give you some more insights in terms of, again, how life was lived in that era. This is just a quick snapshot of a city directory. And again, it talks about Biloxi in 1924, what was available, Gulfport, Ocean Springs. So again, the last one talked about genealogy societies and directories. So it gave you some insights in terms of information you can find. I just quickly Googled that, and that's what showed up. Now let's take a look at the Jackson Hines library system. Again, interesting, okay? Again, there's a link up left to either give them a call or info, like here, infolibrary.org. So again, these are resources for you to tap into. And again, it gives you insights in terms of a first look at the page itself. At the very top, again, take a look at what's available, online catalogs, about, services, resources. Let's take a look and see. Research database. A couple of these I'm totally unfamiliar with. I'll be the first one to admit it. I'm not familiar with Magnolia. I'm not familiar with Westlaw and Next. And then the Clarion below is a newspaper. So again, when you look at those, the Clarion Ledger. So again, you can click on any one of these, expand it, and find out what information may be applicable to support your research. And the last one just gives you a quick snapshot of what's available. Pages, free services, free resources, news categories, and the like. So again, I always like to go to the libraries and see what's available, because for me, a library really is the cornerstone of the community in terms of some kinds of information. And down here, because they had a whole lot of libraries, but I want to point this one out. This is one of their, like our Allen County Library system, the Mega Evers Library was a library within that system itself. Now again, here are the online resources that I found very quickly from Mississippi. You can find others too, and you've got it on your sheet there. It can provide you, again, a different look from different perspectives. And again, partway down, there's one that talks about vital records. So again, the key thing is look online by Googling to see what resources might be available on a particular website. Now here, the Mississippi Department of Archives, again, there's one listed for genealogy. Well, what does it have? Death records, census records, county records, court cases, and it shows you how to find the court records. And so again, and down below, DAWS rolls the enumeration of educable children. So the latest date, the oldest date is 1850, while the others are as late as 1950. So again, that's an interesting list, educable children. Then the Freedmen's Bureau labor contracts. That's a biggie. Again, because many of our ancestors post the Civil War went through the Freedmen's Bureau, and this particular bureau, again, lists the contracts, which record the freeman's agreement to work for a planter, and it could very well be their former master. And again, it shows what was included in that agreement, and also what information is available with that name. County marriage records. There's a statewide marriage index, and there's a Freeman's Bureau marriage record section here too. So this is a very, very interesting listing of information available on one website. In this case, the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Military resources. It talks about, again, not only the Civil War and the Confederacy, but also other things as well. Now, the only pension files available at the archives are those of individuals who served in the Confederate Army and Navy. Interesting. Again, well, this is the Confederacy, folks. Now, I always talk about a particular location for resources. Now, these two I tend to hit first. The Ancestry card catalog, because I can go in there by title. Again, Ancestry itself, again, I can search in the name and all this other stuff. But under card catalog, I can search by topic, by location. And so this, if I put down Mississippi, and I put down for up would show all the information in that card file relative to Mississippi itself. If I did vital records, only the vital records information would show up. So again, look at your topics and see what's available. The Family Research Wiki, Family Search Research Wiki is another fantastic tool. Similarly, again, put in the title, and again, you'll be able to find more information relative to it. Now, as I look at research approaches for Alabama and Mississippi, things I want to do are locate and investigate the communities. How did they change? Where were they located? How big were they? Where was the county seat? I also want to locate family name, a family name or names, as I mentioned, because people married. Use the fan club, because when you go through a census and you find your family, look around them and see what other people are listed in that census record or any other record. Now, where can other records or information reside? Again, we talk about, in smaller communities, churches, cemeteries, directories, newspapers. And the newspapers, again, may be a countywide newspaper. Again, the community may be so small, it doesn't have a newspaper. What time period are we looking for? Did they leave? When did they leave? Where did they go? Did family members remain in the area? Again, you may have an oral history of the migration of your family from these states. I use some up north, for example, from Mississippi and Alabama, for example, to Fort Wayne. How did they get here? What time frame did they get here? And build your family trees and histories, and use the power of Ancestry or Family Search to help you do that. You put a tree in, and again, the leaves on Ancestry and other things too, gives you some insights. They may not always be accurate, but again, it gives you some insights in terms of what to look for. And a family history, as well as a genealogy, is a key thing, because it talks about how your family lived in a particular time period, and where did they live in a particular time period? What did they experience? In summary, I just want to summarize here. A deep dive does require a detective's approach. You must decide, what are you seeking? Also determine what's your evidence. Build a straw man and work with it. Who, what, where, why, and how can help you build and tailor your research. What records support your research? And is there any information also to do so? Locate physically where your relatives lived. What is the county or city or town or unincorporated area? And again, Google Maps, you name it. Again, gives you some insights over the years. And use due diligence to understand the community and the area. What time frame did they live there? What occupations did they do? And are there any other potential records based upon that occupation? Understand the migration path. How did they get here? If it happens to be Fort Wayne from down there, was it train, car, horse and buggy? What time period was it? And the key thing is, who stayed behind and what did they do? So again, when you do a deep dive, as I try to do, there are many, many questions that do emerge again, and the goal is to see how you can find answers for those questions. Let me show you something here real quick, as I mentioned here. Because what I want to do now is go back and share my screen here, and I want to show you something else here. Okay. This is an example of a file here at the library. And again, it's a fantastic file. And again, share here. Everybody can see it, okay? And Guzzy, can you guys see it? Okay. This is a fantastic resource for the Allen County system here. Again, there are research guides in Mississippi. talking about African Americans, biographical information, census and tax lists. Remember, I talked about tax lists in those areas. Again, there are books or documents associated with it. Churches. And again, there's an inventory of church archives of Mississippi, 1940. We also have colonial and court records. Again, a listing of them here. Directories. Information about land. We have maps and information about the military itself. Native American newspapers, periodicals, vital records, all of these, and you can pull this up as I did from the website itself and download it. So again, it's available for you to highlight what you want to research here locally and use it to find what you are seeking. And again, you've got our research tools and tips. Again, you've got our Facebook page, our YouTube, and our email. Are there any questions? And I'm guessing you may be to help.
Thank you, Dr. Brothers. Looks like there's a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
One is from Lillian Starks, and she asks, has your research ever brought up information of interest about Sumter County, Alabama, by chance?
No, I haven't. Again, I don't have any relatives that I recognize that live down there. I mean, that does not mean I don't have any relatives, just none that I recognize at this point. So I've not researched that one.
Okay, and the next question is, give me just a moment here. Karen Berry says, I want to find the family of my great-great-grandfather. I have him and his second wife in the census in Louisiana, but his death records say he lived in Mississippi. So I don't have a fan base, marriage records, or where he lived in Mississippi. How do I get started to find records to trace him in Mississippi?
One of the key things I'd ask you to do is look at the map. Look at the map first, and again, there may be some indications of again prior census with his name that talk about where he was. Again, one of the key things is, as I mentioned, people move back and forth. Across state lines, across county lines. And again, that's where I look for first. Look in previous census records. And again, in the directory, again, he said he lived in a city in Louisiana. See if there's a city directory, again, for that time period. See if if Louisiana had a state census, and what time period was it?
The other part of her question, it says oral history says he was never enslaved, and this is her great-great-grandfather, so it must go back pretty.
Because if he was never enslaved, he would show up in census records with his name, because again, free people showed up in the census by name. So consequently, again, it's one way of looking at it and looking for him. And if she wants to send us some more questions to our email, we'll see how we can help her out.
Okay. Holly Schrank asks or says, enslaved folks were often passed from family to family via probate, and only first names were listed. Any tips for figuring out how to research what their surnames would be?
The first guess would be, if they're passed down within a family, find out what the family name was, in that situation. And because remember, the reason a slave had a last name was because you could identify the owner. That was the reason for it, originally. And then Post-slavery, again, it was up to the individuals whether to keep the name or not. But and I did notice that in records. Look at the names as it passed down from family member to family member. Look at the last name, and in that sense, and then look at the last owner in that situation to see if that name might be appropriate.
Okay. Also, let's see. Carolyn Fair is asking, her research is Union Springs,
Okay.
Troy, and Montgomery, Alabama. Do you
Okay.
have any tips for her? Yeah.
Okay. Again, depending upon the time frame, look at the census records, look at the city directories, and again, ask the librarians if you have a particular question. You may be surprised what happens when you ask a librarian, because they've done quite a bit of research in that sense, and they know their collection. So again, they may give you a hint. The other thing to contact, and again, on some of these, you'll see it, is look at the Historical Society or Genealogy Society in the area. They also can provide help.
Okay.
And one other thing, look at the newspapers. The newspapers can help in many cases. And the obituaries are really fantastic. Plus also, again, whether it was our own people or others, again, in smaller communities, they showed up in the newspaper easily, again, because they were members of the community itself. So consequently, you may be surprised what you find out about a family member in that time frame from the newspaper.
Okay. Clay Wilson's question, is there information about folks from Mississippi who participated in the Homestead Act?
It would be. Our good guy back here, again, can give you more insights. But again, the answer is I would suspect so. The Homestead Act, talking about Mississippians who participated in that. Adrian, do you know anything about that at all?
He'll need to come up to the
because he gave a fantastic presentation relative to that.
I'm pretty sure that there was people.
We can't hear you, Adrian.
Yeah, this mic up here. Yeah.
I'm not sure if Mississippi, because I know there were several states. I believe Mississippi is one. But as far as the Homestead Act, there's a Facebook group that Bernice Bennett that she did. So there's a lot of information on there about it. I believe in Mississippi is one of the states where people homesteaded, but I'm not for sure. Don't take that as.
But again, it makes sense because if you migrate in that situation and homesteading was available to you, you would have done it.
Yeah.
And there were communities in that area that were all Black communities.
Yeah, because I know my family, they homesteaded in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. So, okay. So there's a strong possibility, that there may be some of her relatives that did.
Okay, the next question is from Lillian. We know that AI, going back to Clay's question, Catherine Schultz says, try putting the names into the BLM-GLO website.
Okay.
Bureau of Land Management Waste.
Yep.
And then Jessica Trotter put in the link.
Great.
Okay, so Lillian Stark's next question is, we know that AI or artificial intelligence search engines such as the GPT chat now do research on all subjects. And these search engines also produce their output in many written forms, such as articles, texts, books, emails, or any number of ways. Will the Allen County Library or other genealogy sources contribute to these open artificial intelligence databases so that genealogy researchers can research in that manner too?
Kurt, that's up to you. I have no clue.
Yeah, that sounds like a Kurt Witcher question.
Kurt is the manager of our genealogy center. So he provide that answer.
So a very excellent question. That AI format is still very new. Most libraries and archives are not bleeding edge adopters of technology. So we are definitely watching that. I believe that Ancestry, MyHeritage, and Family Search also have AI formats that are in development. And I guess I would put my money on those first, as opposed to just a general AI platform. But who knows how things are going to develop. So it's going to be exciting to watch. Will we jump on that one this year? Probably not.
That's fair, Kurt. It does take a while to develop the process to get involved. I appreciate that. Yes.
Okay, there are some, here's a suggestion from Pamela Broussard. It would be fantastic if you did a case study next time.
I can, yeah, we can do that. But I wanted to get the information out first, yeah.
Right. Also, Holly Schrank says, thank you. I'm re-energized to tackle Mississippi again.
Great. One thing I've not done, again, these two states, I've not put my last name in there, the brother's name, to see if, again, if anything shows up, relative, a potential relative. I will do that also because my fourth great grandfather, last name Brothers, was in Virginia and then headed to New York and then to Canada, but he would have had siblings at some point in time. And I suspect they may have had the same last name, at least initially anyhow. So that, and again, in that time period, again, slaves moved around. So in that context, it's highly possible, again, I do have relatives there. Unfortunately, when I do DNA, in many cases, I may not recognize the name, the current name, unless in that format, they'll list, give me a listing of names I can recognize as being part of my family.
Okay. Clay Wilson says, is there a list of folks from Davis Bend who moved to Mound Bayou?
Who? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Clay, if you're still on the call, on the Zoom, if you could give us more information.
Hello, everyone. I have some ancestors who helped found Mound Bayou, but I was looking for more relatives. I have been to Mound Bayou, but I'm looking for something where I don't have to go. Since I live in California, just taking up and going to Mississippi is quite a project for me.
Yes, it is.
I'm wondering if there is some place that has a list of those people who moved from from Davis Bend around 1886 to settle in Mound Bayou after that. I know some of the names, but I was seeing if there was, because I know I have relatives who live there at this moment, but I'm not sure who they are.
Understand. How big is the community?
1,500.
My recommendation is find the county seat and see if there's a resource at the county seat, or again, if such a small community, find the closest library and ask that question.
That would be out of Cleveland then. Okay, out of Cleveland, Mississippi. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Also, there's a question. How did people travel in the late 1700s? My great-grandfather lived 60 miles away from where he worked in Mississippi, a border county with Louisiana. How would he have traveled from Louisiana to Mississippi? I found one rail line, but it was 20 miles away from his home in Louisiana.
Two ways. My suspicion, the first way would be horse and buggy, literally. And the second way, walk. To say that, but that happened quite a bit, and people did that also. They did walk for a couple of days and spend a couple of months there working, and then harvesting, and then head back. So again, horse and buggy would probably be, The key, not as many folks rode horseback in that time frame like you see the old cowboy movies. Again, if we live in an Amish community, I've only seen 2 Amish kids ride horses with saddles. All of the family members and all of the families had horses and buggies. Go for it. And this is our chairwoman. And I want to say, Ms. Roberta Ridley, a wealth of information.
Not necessarily, not following Dr. Brothers, but it was an interesting, I guess, scenario I want to call from Clay in terms of how he's tracking his family. And the first thing that popped into my mind is if whether or not he has ever actually looked at the Percy collection that the Allen County Public Library has, because within the Percy collection, there's a lot of local information that has been collected as a result of family histories and organizations that have followed newsletters, church records, things of that nature, either by county or, by county and then topic. So that's one of the things that I wanted to suggest to him that he might want to take into consideration. Not being here in Fort Wayne, there is some access to the Percy collection and also inquiries directly to us as well as the Allen County Public Library in order to check and see if there's information about early migration families coming from and going to those locations that he indicated. My brain is overloaded right now, so I can't remember exactly what he said. But I would suggest that you document that inquiry that you had, send it to us. We can always take a look at it. And Kurt, forgive me. What was the other collection you were suggesting? That? Yeah, right. State archives and Black newspapers in the area that might address it, and not necessarily the counties that he's talking about, because in that particular genre, they group together counties quite a bit in reporting information. So that's a lot, Clay, for you to take in, but it's several things that you should notate because you're going seriously outside of the boundaries to try to find it. Out of the box, that's the word. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Dr. Brothers, there's one last question before you close.
Okay.
Let's see, what is the earliest year for probate records in Mississippi? Danielle is trying to find an enslaved ancestor and has her enslaver's name and knows that the ancestor died before 1860. And if you'll tilt your camera down so we can see you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Tilt it, yeah.
Send that information to me and I'll track it for you. I don't know that on the top of my head because that's not one of the states that I typically work with as far as that goes, but I certainly can find out pretty quickly.
Any last words, Dr. Brothers?
I want to say thank you all, for joining with us, and thank you for all those great questions. Again, it energizes us again to help us do our research and being more successful in helping others. So again, our search continues as we get to know our family, both present and past, and good luck in your search. Thank you very much.